Okay, so today we're going to talk about problem types with addition and subtraction. And there's four basic problem types when it comes to addition and subtraction. And the important part is not to think, well, comparison problems are always subtraction problems, and parts of a total problems are always addition problems. It's not like that. It's what any of these problems, comparison, parts of a total, getting and gaining, losing, spending, giving, using, all of these problems can be both addition and subtraction problems. It just depends on what part is missing. So, for example, on any of these, when you have the smaller pieces that are missing, then you're going to have to subtract to find your answer. On any of these where the larger piece is missing, you're going to have to add to find your answer. So that's really important for the kids to be able to see it visually and be able to input back in their answer and to see, does this make sense? Or did I put an answer that's really big right here and now I have something small here and small here and I end up, maybe I did the wrong thing. So let's just talk about this. Comparison problem. The graphic organizer is all the same. You have a long piece and then you have a small piece and then something that fills in. The important part is to remember is that you can have more than two pieces here. Particularly for this one, it's parts of a total. It doesn't have to just be part. It could be part total, or it could be four part, however many parts. And as the kids get older, it'll become more complex. Same thing here. They could gain multiple things. They could start out with something and gain multiple things before they end up. And also here, they could start out with something and lose or give or spend or use multiple things before they end up. So helping kids see that, we're just going to start with some very basic problems and then just so you get an understanding of what's happening here. All right, so we're going to keep this kind of right over here, so we'll be able to reference it. I know it's behind me, but I'll get out of the way. But let's just read this problem. Meg bought 2 pieces of ribbon. One piece was 3/5 of a yard long. The other piece was 1/2 of a yard long. How much ribbon did Meg buy? So in this one, we have, in my mind, what I think of when I do this is I say, look, she bought one part of a ribbon, and then she bought another part of a ribbon, and then we have how much total ribbon. So in this case, we know one part of her ribbon we know is 1/2. We know another part of the ribbon that she bought is 3/5. So we have the 2 parts, and we're simply missing the larger total. So what would we do in this case? In this case, we would add. That's the only thing that would make sense to do here. So we have 3/5 plus 1/2, and of course you'd have to find a common denominator, do all this. Right now, what we're just trying to look at is understanding the problem, understanding whether it's addition or subtraction problem before actually solving it. That's not what I wanted to do. In this case, we have Inez has 3/5 quart of juice. She drank 1/3 quart. How much juice does she have now? So in this case, Inez is using something or spending something. So in this case, it tells us how much she starts out with, 3/5. It tells us how much she drank or used. In this case, we're going to put used. And that's 1/3. So what are we missing? We're missing how much she ended up with, how much was left over. And so in this case, since we're missing one of the smaller ones, we would, of course, subtract. 3/5 minus 1/3. And it's also important to see that you're always going to subtract the larger thing, or start with that, and then how much they used or lost right here. Okay, so that's this one. The important thing is kids are so used to just grabbing at keywords. Oh, it said left in there. That must mean you subtract. Well, it doesn't always mean that, because and this just helps the students be able to organize their thoughts a little bit better. Okay, in this one we have Cade runs 3/10 of a mile. Ty runs 1/5 of a mile more than Cade. So this is important. This is clearly a comparison problem. We have two people and we're trying to figure out, it says how far does Ty run? So in this case, it's comparing because we see this more. And sometimes you might see comparison problems are given away when it talks about this person has this much more, or this person did it this much longer, or further, or faster, all those comparison words. So in this case, we have Ty and Cade. And one of them is going to have run further than the other one. That one's going to be the big one. So let's take a look. Cade runs 3/10 of a mile. Ty runs 1/5 of a mile more. So that means that who ran more? Ty. So he's going to be the big person here. And it says Ty runs 1/5 of a mile more than Cade, but we don't know how much Ty ran because it says, look at our question. How far does Ty run? So we have to put a question mark here. All right, it tells us that Cade runs 3/10 of a mile. So we can put, it would be the little one, and we can put 3/10 here. And it tells us the difference. It tells us how much more. Ty runs 1/5 of a mile more. This is one that people typically would subtract on because they just look for clue words and they don't really think about the problem. In this case, we're missing our big, which means we would add. It looks like a multiplication, but we would add. We'd add 1/5 plus 3/10, and of course we have to find a common denominator and all that. So you can see how the comparison helps us. All right, our last one. On a smaller board. Lou has 2 1/4 of gallons of gas. She stops and pumps 5 1/3 gallons into her tank. How many gallons does she have now? So she's getting something in this problem. Tells us what she starts with, so we can find the start. It tells us how much she gains, 5 1/3. So to get the end, we would have to, of course, add. Now, any of these, you can just change around the scenarios and change around the question and make all these, every comparison problem. This one was an addition, but of course we can find comparison problems that are subtraction. Same thing with parts of a total. If we were missing one of the parts instead of the total, we would have to subtract. And the same thing with getting or gaining something. If it had told us how much she started with and told us how much she ended up with and asked us how much she got, of course we would have to subtract to get that answer. And the same thing with losing and spending. In this case, we had to subtract, but oftentimes it tells us how much they gave away and how much they ended up with, and it asks us how much they began with or started with. And in that case, we would add. So the important thing is not to think, oh, it's a losing problem, that means you subtract every time. Don't think of it that way. Think about, what are we missing? Are we missing one of the smaller parts, or are we missing the larger part? If you're missing one of the smaller parts, then you have to subtract. If you're missing the larger part, then you're going to have to add.